Good morning, everyone. It's Thursday. It's sunny here in South London right now. It's just gone 10:30, which means it's time for the next BoPS show and tell. So welcome. This is our 8th show and tell of this phase of product development for BoPS, a new back office planning system for local planning authorities that processes planning applications. My name is Tom Buttrick from Southwark Council, and I'm here today with colleagues to show you what we've been up to over the past 2 weeks. So please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and we'll keep you updated on new content and what we've been up to. As ever, this show and tell is being recorded, and it will shortly be available on the channel alongside all of our other show and tells from previous sprints. Next slide, please, James. So for those who don't know, BoPS, Back Office Planning System, is a new software application that's been designed by and for local planning authorities. Our users, as you can imagine, are planning officers who work through their caseload of planning applications, and also the planning managers who review the recommendations of the officers and then issue the decision to the applicant. We recently launched the private beta of BoPS, where partner councils are using the MVP of the tool to process live lawful development certificate applications. And we're also using our sister digital tool, the Ripper tool, which means reducing invalid planning applications, for this process. So Ripper is the tool where applicants submit their application online through a web portal. BoPS is the back office system where planning officers process the application. So next slide, please. We're going to be going through what we've been up to this past sprint. So if you have any questions about what we show you today, or any questions about the tool, click on the link here, this rebranding link in the description below, and add your question, and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please, James. So what have we been up to this sprint? Let's see. So the theme of this sprint has been, again, around sitemap functionality, i.e. the sitemap that's been submitted to by the applicant or not, and also the validation process. So once BoPS receives the application, the officer checks the application and checks to see if it's valid and can be processed. So in terms of this sitemap, we've been looking at the functionality to actually draw the red line itself within the tool if a red line plan wasn't submitted. We've also done some functionality around showing the information that Ripper sends to us about the application. Again, we're looking at removing a couple of the workarounds for the MVP process. And this is around the invalid application notification that we would send to the applicant if the application was invalid. We've been looking again at how a case officer assesses the application and what do we need to do to capture the assessment process by the applicant. We've also looked at we've been speaking to MHLG around some ongoing funding for the project. We've got a new team member joining us, and we've been also speaking to MHLG about the future of the project in terms of what we should cover. And as it's August, we've been taking a few holidays as well. So James, next slide, please. As I said, we met the MHLG, who are the funder of the project. We met them last week. We have been just discussing how we align both the Ripper phase, the phase of development that Ripper is in, and our phase, because we're slightly misaligned, to align both phases. So we needed to apply for an interim bit of money to cover the end of our phase to the next part to the end of the Ripper phase. So ultimately, we are having both projects aligned. So we're just finalising that, and we'll have that ticked off this next sprint. Next slide, please. We've also got a new team member, Gemma Williams, who's joined the team at Southwark Council. Gemma, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, yes, I'm a planner at Southwark. Excited to be on the project and to join your team.
That's great, Gemma. We look forward to having you on the team and using your expertise as a planner. So thank you for joining us. Next slide, please. Great. I'll hand over to Tom now from Unboxed, who will go through the design work he's been working on. Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, everyone. I am Tom Gaylor. I am a UX designer with Unboxed, who are a delivery partner on this project. And for anyone who would have seen last week's show and tell, I talked a little bit about some work that had been undertaken through the sort of design aspects of this project, looking at how planning officers are evidencing their assessments when they assess LDCs in particular. So that's particularly the application type we're focusing on at the moment. And through this, I'd been looking at officer report templates for proposed and existing LDCs. And I'd been interviewing planning officers and managers from across the partners about how they were using these, what they were good for, where the limitations were, and how they, thinking a little bit about how they could support creating a more efficient, more data-rich way of evidencing the assessment. So as an officer goes through and they check against policy whether things are permitted or not, they're able to record this in a way that can be made sense of, so that rather than just being a bunch of text which doesn't have any connection to data, we can sort of pick out each point and connect it together and start to make planning more smart. And so what you can see on the right were a few of the comments that came out through interviews. So you can see some of the reasons that report templates or reports were seen as useful. So they provide evidence, they support external scrutiny, and they're helping provide a narrative. So particularly help supporting the officer explain to their manager why they've come to a particular recommendation. And you can also see this quite insightful comment that it's quite hard for these reports to make planning easy for everybody. And there's a bit of a challenge around how we translate between how officers think about and talk about their decision-making process and the policies that are relevant or not, and how the public might understand that and feel that they're able to understand the process that's gone through and to see why the result they've received is the result they've received. And so this work has been leading on to the definition of user needs. So if I could have the next slide, please, James. So here you can see some mapping out of these user needs. And you can see there's quite a range of users who are some way connected to the process of evidencing assessment. And that currently is an officer report in some councils. So you can see the officer, the manager, the applicant, and potentially other things like neighbours, enforcement teams, consultees, even government and local council who may have interest in what are the particular points of failure or what are the common reasons for a refusal of an application. And this has been informed by the interviews and analysis of reports. And this is really going to support some ongoing design work, which I'll hopefully be able to share with you in the next show and tell at the end of the next sprint. So I think that's all from me. So I'm going to hand over to James, who will talk through some of the development.
Hello, I'm James. I'm tech lead on this project. I'm going to go through some of the work that we've developed and delivered over the last couple of weeks. So the first feature that we've done and launched is around highlighting the important questions that RIPA used to get to its verdict. So last sprint, we delivered and showed this bit of work here. So this showing what RIPA's opinion is of what the verdict of what its result should be. So if it thinks it should be planning permission or permitted development, and the officer and the applicant can decide whether to go through with it and have their opinion on it too. We've added this new part down here, which is highlighting the questions that RIPA thought was important. So if I show this in the real application, we're saying here API user, this will say RIPA when RIPA starts sending us information. So we've agreed with RIPA, this is how it's going to work, but RIPA isn't quite sending that to us yet. But we can see the result from the API user. So here, RIPA thought it was planning permission needed. This is why the applicant disagreed with that and what is applying anyway. And instead of the officer having to go through all of the questions and answers that RIPA asked and the applicant responded, RIPA is saying question 22, this is what it thought was very important in coming to that opinion. So if we go back to the presentation and the demo. The other big bit of feature work that we've done this sprint is around officers to draw a digital red line. So we've come to sort of important decision that we want all applications in BoPS to have a digital red line. And when we say digital, we mean we have the polygon on a map, on a digital map rather than a PDF. This is so that we can generate, we know where it is, we can generate the area, we can do all sorts of machine reading of that information. But we also acknowledge that sometimes applicants won't be providing us with a digital red line. Maybe this is accessibility, sometimes it's just legacy, something will be coming through paper. So we've added the ability for an officer to draw it for the applicant. I can show that here. So if we go to view the sitemap, we can see that no digital sitemap provided. And we've now got this new feature of draw digital sitemap. So this enables us as the officer to go in. If any documents was provided with the tag of sitemap, they would be shown here. So we could just open it here and copy it and make sure that things marry up. But let's say that we want this building here. This is the client. I'm not an planning officer, so see how that looks, but there we go. And that's now been put there, and we can see that this sitemap was drawn by me, Seymour. That's there, and before validation we can redraw it. So maybe we got it wrong. We want to actually say it was here. We redraw that, save that, and now that's been updated. It's there. And once it's been validated, the officer can't redraw it without going through some change request stuff. And we can see in the activity log, this is all audited. So we can see when it was created at 10 o'clock, we can see just now I created a red line drawing and then I updated it a minute later. That's that feature. And then we've had another bit of work. We've been talking with Ripper about sharing a red line tool, sort of a polygon tool for maps. So you can see that we have our tool for drawing lines and displaying lines on maps, and Ripper have had their own one. That's sort of a duplication of work, and also can create inconsistencies between how they display their red line and how we display our red lines. That will obviously reduce trust in those red lines. So we're quite excited. I'm quite excited about the opportunity for us to create a shared component, shared open source component between the two of us. And we've been having discussions in the background about what our requirements for both projects are, and they overlap a lot. And so Ripper have already started work on this. So I'm going to sort of demo what Ripper have been doing. This is the science bit. So they've got the source code of everything they've been doing open source. Anyone can use it. Our two projects will be using it, but anyone in government could use it if they find it useful. And this is what it looks like. So you can see that they're using the vector ordnance survey map, and you can draw a polygon on it like this. You can see it's slightly different. So we'll have you can drag and reshape things. And so in the next sprint, we're going to be integrating that and tweaking it and contributing to it, feeding back in some features into that Ripper might use. And I think that'll be, good cross-platform, good cross-product software development. That is the end of our development work for the last sprint. I'll now hand back to Tom.
Thank you, James. As a planner who loves maps, it's always great to see further functionality being developed. So we're really excited to see the development of a tool that could be used across both projects, but also for wider uses as well, which is really exciting to see. So yeah, look forward to the next show and tell to see where we get with that. Which leads on to this next slide. So we'll be, as James says, we'll be picking up drawing and displaying maps in both Ripper and BoPS. For the next sprint, we're also going to be, again, continuing our work on the validation process around notifications to applicants. as Tom talked about earlier, we are going to be continuing work on evidencing the planning officer's assessment, i.e. the tasks they do to assess the application and how that feeds into BoPS and the functions that it needs to have. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be finalising the continuous funding model bid for the interim funding. So next slide, please. We're speaking to a number of councils as well as our partner councils about BoPS, about the work that we're doing, both the functionality but also the testing. So we test each of the functions that we develop with planning officers. So if you'd like to be part of that or just know more about the tool, do get in touch. My details are there. Peter Forrest's details as well, who's the fellow product owner here at Southwark. There's our social media, we update there. So yeah, we look forward to hearing from you. Next slide, please. So this brings us to the end of the show and tell today, but we would like to answer your questions if anyone has been submitting them using the link there. I'm going to hand over to Gemma to see if there are any questions. Gemma.
Yeah, we've had one submitted. We've had two now. The first one is, there's no name attached, but will the polygons drawn in tools link to the GIS systems used by the councils, and how will that be done?
So, I mean, that's a good question, a good broad question there. So, I mean, firstly, the mapping tool, and James, do jump in here if I stray into technical areas. The tool obviously creates a polygon that can be used, and that polygon can be used with other systems if it was needed to. In relation to other GIS systems, which I'm going to, in this instance, I'm going to take as referring to maybe other planning data sets, be it, for example, conservation areas or similar. We have a plan to utilize planning data sets within the tool. I know Ripper uses that as well. So the integration of the red line plan with those data sets is planned. So yep, we would be able to use that red line, the polygon that's been drawn in the future with a wider feature set within the tool. James, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
I think that's right. I think crucially we're adding the ability to, as I was saying there, to make sure that we do have a polygon for every application. In terms of integrating it with existing sorts of GIS systems within each council, that hasn't been prioritized yet in terms of the work. It's certainly doable, apart from maybe the bit that sort of is a little bit reticent about that is obviously each council has their own system, and so we'd need to do a bit of discovery around how easy it is to integrate into each one of those. Just needs prioritizing, I think.
Yep, I mean it's definitely on the on our backlog, and as and when partners who decide on what should we build next get to that point, we will do. But it's definitely utilizing planning data is going to be an important part of this tool. It's an important part of Ripple already, so we will definitely be doing that, because as we know, if for example a conservation area is triggered, should we say, because a site is within a conservation area, we know that means that something has to happen within BoPS. For example, the type of conditions that could be required, or the type of consultation that would be required. So we're calling that considerations, and planning data is that an important part of considerations. So yeah, it's definitely going to be looked at. Gemma, is there a second question, did you say?
Yeah, so there's and we've had a few more come in during that. There's a slightly linked question where, specific to the polygons, talking to the polygons in uniform that land charges rely on. But I'm not sure if that was covered roughly by when you were talking about the integration with other council systems.
I'd say it's the same thing. It's at the moment we don't have the integration into existing systems for, as I said, for those reasons previously.
Great. So another question we've had is, will officers be able to see the outgoing correspondence sent to the applicant?
Do you want
James,
to take this one, Tom?
Oh, James, if you take that first, and then I'll add if there's anything else.
I think that we've started putting in the ability to see some of the notifications that have been sent out. I know that there is a lot of product work happening in the background around trying to view and see how all the correspondence are built and made, and sort of from a development perspective, we're slightly waiting on that, and then we can make sure that we're displaying that to the officers. But I think that's a good thing. Yeah. Maybe Tom G has some points on that.
Yeah, I'd just like to say it's definitely something we are looking to support as and when we have decided on sort of notification we're sending. So decision notices, they're visible, invalidation letters or and stuff like that. Those will all be visible post the point, once that decision has been made. So it's something we are definitely looking to integrate, is the ability for that correspondence to be visible. So you'll be able to see that it's gone out in the audit log, but you'll also be able to see sort of just the copy of that letter email that was sent to the applicant.
I mean, it's interesting. I don't even know if this is just me, just just thinking about things, but is there a user need for having a literal log, like the activity log, but a notification log? I don't know if we've explored that. It's something interesting to think about, maybe. So it's a good question.
Yeah, definitely a good question. And I think as thinking about the user need there, I think there would be that would definitely be a richer feature for the tool. It's I think having the back and forth rather than in the detail of that, rather than just the actual activity, the audit trail of it, would be a really good feature. So yeah, thank you for that question. That's a good one.
Okay, we've had another question that's coming from Lisa about, can the RIPA answers to the questions be inserted into a form template rather than a long list of questions and answers in BoPS?
I think this is probably one for Tom G.
This is it. We're sort of looking at this at the moment. So this is requires a bit of work between the two systems, but we are looking at how we can support officers to look at those questions in a way that makes sense to them. So is that in relation to, for example, different parts of the policy, which questions are in relation to Class A, for example, or Class C or D? But it's still an ongoing piece of work. So if you'd like to speak to the team about your processes and share that and feed that in, we're always looking for people to take part in testing and research around that. So yeah.
And there is a technical aspect to that as well, I think, which Tom pointed in, which is we're sort of relying on RIPA to explain to us the meaningfulness of its data, because we don't want to be duplicating all of the logic that RIPA came to get to its conclusions. So at the moment, RIPA is sending us a long list of questions. We need to, as Tom was saying, work with RIPA to think it has all of this information. How does it want to display it to the officer?
Definitely. And just to sort of to summarize there, we are definitely iterating this, I think, as Tom says, we're working with planning officers, with the users of this tool to work out what's the best way to show that information to the case officer to get to them in the most meaningful way. And we will continue to iterate that to give the planning officer what they need.
Right, and we do have one more, which didn't have a name attached, but how will the BoPS data update the land charges software?
Okay, at this stage, that's not a functionality we've got developed. It's in I think it's deep. It will have to be assessed at some stage. It's not in the immediate future. So I think the answer to the question is we'll have to wait and see. We will work with obviously the relevant users, with colleagues here, to work out how we would do that. But it would definitely be, I guess, pushing information out to another system, or within a different module within BoPS. But it's a bit of it's a bit of a long way to get to that stage yet, but it's definitely will be in scope at some stage. Is that James? Anything else on that?
I imagine that Peter is the perfect person to answer that question, who is currently on holiday, unfortunately. So I think we had Peter's email up there earlier, who might be able to respond to that when he gets back.
Yeah, we can take that one away, definitely.
And that's all the questions we've had.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Gemma. And thank you to the rest of the team today for the presentation. Thank you to all of the planners across our partner councils who take part in the testing. They're the ones who really give us the best feedback on how the product is working and how we can make it better. So thank you for your time. We really appreciate that. Do get in touch if you want to be part of that testing or know more about the tool. And hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. So thank you.